Good evening, everybody. I believe we'll have Gerald do his real quick. There we go. Get everybody in here. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Robbie Green. I'm the percussion teacher at Klein Collins High School. I'm the assistant band director too as well. And I also teach the beginner percussion classes at my feeder schools, which are Schindewolf Intermediate and Strock Intermediate. My co-presenter here is Mr. Gerald Dillard, and he is the head director at Oak Ridge and Conroe ISD. So we're going to get started here, and it's about 7:01, and we've got enough people here. So let's see, let me get back to my presentation here, and cool. So what this is going to do is more or less give you a roadmap. You can use this type of the roadmap and the outline with just about any method book that you want to. But this is just kind of the roadmap that I follow through, and you're welcome to use it as well. I'll have I put the document that kind of outlines a little bit of what we're looking at today in the Facebook page. That with the link and everything in there. There's a document in there. But I'll also be providing a more detailed document that kind of gives them way more detail than what we're going to be looking at today too as well. If you would like to look at that, I'll have that for you. All right, so let's get started. We have the first one. Start with the year-long breakdown. We start with music literacy, procedures and expectations. This is the first 3 weeks. The second thing we do are limb coordination and stroke development. I'm isolating just those two things specifically in the next 3 weeks, weeks 4 to 7. The next one is a lot larger chunk, and this is week 8 to almost the second week of December, where we're taking those two literacy, procedure expectations, limb coordination, and stroke development, and putting them together through synthesis and doing literacy and coordination. So while they're reading, they are doing the good things that we've worked on in the first two. So. Then the second half of the year, starting in the spring, we do keyboard fundamentals and multi-surface reading skills. Keyboard fundamentals, reading skill, and reading skill applications. So like once we establish all the keyboard fundamentals, we go through all the reading process of how to read and then how to build a keyboard piece of music and so on. And then from then to the end of the year, which is around about the third week of April to the end of the school year, is mostly just application of all of these fundamental skills that we've been working on. We're building all of that stuff and just applying it and providing opportunities. And I'm doing that throughout here in the curriculum too as well. But the big thing is the fundamental applications here on the back end of the school year. So, and then if you have the time at the end of the year, I have bonus round, which is kind of like when I have good groups of kids or kids that need certain skills for the concert or whatever, then we hit the bonus round here too as well. So we'll start back to, though, this is the beginning. And if you have taught for a few years, you always know that we get to a point after the third year and you kind of see what the result of your teaching is. This is the place where you fix that, is at the beginning of this 6th grade year. If you want something done and it's not getting done the way you want it to in the 7th and 8th grade year, this is the place to fix it. And so if you want to think about what kind of student do you want, and I always think about that back to the beginning. What kind of student do I want, and how do I want them to respond? How do I want to interact with them? This is the place that I can shape that from the start. If I don't do that, I have to go back and fix that. So, or I'm going to be dealing with that for the next 6 years. So this is something important to think about and something that I always think about when I'm developing my curriculum. So music literacy and procedures and expectations, this is the first 3 weeks. We do procedures, we define everything. How you walk in the room, where do you put your stuff, how do you have your stuff in the bags, what do you do after you put it in your locker or wherever you're putting your things. Everything that you want the students to do has got to be defined. Define it in a certain way and be consistent from the start. This is also where we're teaching the elements of music and notation, grand staff, dynamics, time signatures, and so on. This is in that first 2 weeks, and I'm typically introducing 3 to 4 elements a day as I go, and I compound and review. Verbiage. This is where we're also doing, I mean, whether you choose to do Eastman or standard counting system, but along with the notation, and as we're teaching the elements of music, we're also teaching verbiage and how to connect the verbiage to the notation and all that stuff as we go. Every day in this, while I'm doing this, I'm kind of old school, even though I know we use technology and I have a lot of technology things. I have the students write out their music. So the first few days, it's 1 or 2 measures, but by the end of that first week and second week, they're doing 3 and 4 measures at a time. And I have them use all of these elements that we're learning about in their music, provided certain, within certain confines. We also start during about the second week or third week, when we know what the notes in the staff are, we start doing note naming quizzes. And this actually continues throughout the entire year for the first 5 minutes of every class. And I have a whole procedure that I go through at musictheory.net. I can explain that to you in a little bit later if you have any questions about it. So we also learn the daily warm-up. We learn how to verbalize that. And most of the time, the kids are actually sitting down while we do this. I'll have them put their hands on their notebook. And we isolate the forearm and we turn for the wrist during this motion, during this time. So while we're saying it, they're focused mostly at this hinge motion. And so this gives us a good starting point when we start to do limb coordination, which is coming up. So we also go through the percussion instrument names for all of the things that are in the room, what they are called, like how many kinds have you called, they've been called Tiffany's before for you, and and things like that. What are the proper the names for those instruments? What stick and mallet do you want to use on each instrument? And so this is also where you can define all of those things for the kids. Don't use these mallets on that marimba. Don't use these on the timpani, and so on and so forth. Set the standards and hold them to the expectations here that you want to have. Label everybody's stuff. Everybody has the same things, and things throughout the year, of course, like to get taken or borrowed or whatever. Make sure that you label everything. Write it down, and I do initials on the sticks, and I put them on the front part of the stick too as well. Instrument care. This is where you teach also the kids how to take care of the instruments, and you can do this while you do the note names too as well. Covering the instruments. Where do you put the mallets? How to lock the wheels. And also, I have a whole thing where the kids hold each other accountable to take care of the instruments. This is a big deal, huge deal. Personal accountability and then individual accountability of each other. And it's nothing personal. This is what we have to do to make sure that we have nice things to play on. And then the culmination of this whole series of 3 weeks is what I like to call, what do you see? And so the kids they write their music out, or I'll put a piece of music in front of them, and using the information that we've learned about the elements and verbiage and all that other kind of stuff throughout this first 3 weeks, it goes through, the students have to tell me exactly what they see in front of them. And I'm writing it on the board as you do it. And the other students are checking it too as well as that person is describing it. And so just to give you an idea of what that looks like, I'm going to have a video here in a second to show you what that looks like. But before I do that, I'm going to show you this. I got this note from a student. I've walked into the band room at one of my intermediates, and I saw this note on the bass drum, and I laughed so hard because some of the things that we've talked about, the kids are starting to hold each other accountable to taking care of the equipment. Yeah, it's great. It was great. And to me, that means that we're doing the right things. So, but that's the accountability part of it, and we hold each other accountable as a team. Okay? So here is the what do you see, just a small snippet. I'll have a longer version of this on my website if you want to see kind of how I prompt the students through some of this stuff. But this is a small example of what do you see.
This snare etude here on your stand. Okay, the one, this is 104. It's a 104 to 116 quarter note, and it should be page number 5. Lily, let's start with you, and we're going to start here at the first measure. Tell me what you see.
I see the time signature, which is in 4/4, and the dynamic, which is in piano. And the rhythms are 1/8 note, 4 16th notes, an 8th note, 6 16th notes, and an 8th note.
Okay, so before we go on there, so you gave me the dynamic. What else, when I'm playing percussion instruments, like dynamically, where am I going to play at? Let's just say, since this is a snare drum etude, does that change anything for me?
you play it at the very edge of the drum.
Very good.
Softly.
Very good. Okay, cool. Let's do the second measure, please.
2 16th notes, 2 eighth notes, 6 16th notes, and a quarter note. Now
Good.
it's in 3/4, and it has gone to mezzo forte, which is halfway through the drum. And then it's 2 16th notes, an eighth note, 2 16th notes, 2 eighth notes, and 2 16th notes.
Very good. Very good. Cannon, start with the second line.
We're still in 3/4 and we're still in mezzo forte. We have 6 16th notes, 2 eighth notes, and 2 16th notes. Now we're in 2/4 in forte, which is in the middle of the drum and you play it loud. 2 16th notes, an eighth note, 2 16th notes, an eighth note, an eighth note, 2 16th notes twice, 4 16th notes, a quarter note.
Very good. Very good. Paul, tell me about the third line, please.
So the whole idea with this is that I try to get the students, we try to create a dialogue, of intellectual dialogue about music. And you can create the type of player that you want. And also I'm telling the students, like when you're doing this, you're creating your inner dialogue. When somebody places something new in front of you, you understand it, what the elements and how it's constructed. This is, to me, is one of the most important things that been for the students to be able to do from the get-go. So, and now I'm going to hand the mic over here to Mr. Gerald Dillard to take on cultivating this part of music literacy in the 7th and 8th grade years and to the expectations.
All right. First of all, we would like to, I think Robbie and I would personally like to thank the Texas Bandmasters Association for allowing us to be selected to do a clinic. And that started the whole process of this idea, Robbie and I working together and putting all this stuff together. So we're very gracious to the Texas Bandmasters Association. Cultivating literacy and procedures and expectations for us, I'm going to look at it at a different perspective than what Robbie does sometimes, because in our schools in Conroe ISD, we have 5-6 campuses, and then we have 7-8 campuses. So the 5-6 campuses are mainly their beginner years, and then 7-8 is what we consider junior high. And my main role, specifically when I was just a percussion director, I would go to the 7-8 campuses. And so these kids have already been playing, quote unquote, for 2 years. And so we broke it down into what we analyze and try to accomplish within their 7th and 8th grade year. So in the fall semesters, it's all about region band music at the beginning of the first 2 months. And we're taking the elements that Robbie just talked about that you work on in the beginning years. We're enhancing them just a little bit and applying them to every element of new foundations that they're developing in 7th and 8th grade years. So the beginning is the fall semester, is the region band music for the first 2 months. In the process of the first 2 months, there's a big thing in our junior high programs around here, especially in Conroe ISD. We do pep rallies for the football teams. And so that means they would like the bands to play, and we do pep rally music. That means the kids get to play on drums and learn how to be part of a drum line for the first time. And so those two elements specifically for September, October, and a little bit of November is that main focus, region band and that pep rally music, where we're analyzing those same literary skills that Robbie was talking about as a beginner. Then we get to the holiday concert, and this is where we're switching over and we're kind of learning the new element of not only the instruments that we were working on for region band music, but we're applying for the first time accessories that they might have done just a little bit as a beginner, but we're enhancing that element. And then in every holiday concert that we try to do within our feeder programs, we try to do a holiday percussion ensemble. And that in itself encompasses everything that we're working on hand in hand for the fall semester. Once we end the fall semester, we start the spring semester. We're very fortunate at our schools that the head directors are very understanding and understand the value of spending time with those percussionists and them not being in a band setting right away. So we're able to split them out and work on solo and ensemble literature. Every child in our band program and the junior highs are doing a solo and an ensemble as a percussionist. So we try to not double it up. If we're doing a mallet ensemble, we try to not to make sure that they're not doing a mallet solo. We try to give them a snare solo or vice versa. And then that encompasses all of the month of January. Then we get to into the February into March. We're concentrating on their UIL concert band literature. And then once we finish UIL, we're concentrating on the spring concert band music. And what a beautiful opportunity that we get. We get to do another ensemble. Now, we try not to make sure that we're doing the same style of ensemble that we did from the Christmas from the holiday season. So we try to do something different. So it's either a novelty ensemble or we're doing something more drum related. If there was a mallet ensemble in the holiday time, or vice versa. So we try to make sure that they get a full view of really cultivating that literacy procedure that Robbie was talking about. And in that process, there are certain procedures that the kids learn and understand how to do. For example, I'll go back to the fall semester. We'll have 3 different rooms set up. We have 3 ensemble rooms at our junior high. One room will be a timpani room. Another room will be the mallet room where we have most of the keyboard instruments. And then the other room will be a practice pad room. And they will split up. We'll have them split up and they will do a rotation in time where they get through all those rooms every single day. And they know the procedure. They know the people that they're connected with in those rooms. So it's an automatic, this is the way it goes. So when kids walk into class, they're not trying to figure out what's going on for the day or asking that one question that we all love as band directors: what are we doing today? Are we playing today? So they know the procedure, they know what to do, they know who they're going to be in the room with. They come and sit down and listen to announcements, and then they get ready to go into their different rooms. And that's like pretty much of a round robin. And the expectations are all laid out of what you're supposed to be doing, because previously at the end of any sectional, we have a sectional once a week, and they're in the mornings. We lay down what's expected for the next sectional for next week. So they have pretty much a full week to be working on their material for their assignment for the next sectional. So the literacy is already laid out, the procedures laid out, and the expectations. And we copy, print, and we do that whole same thing for preparing for Christmas music, for solo and ensemble in the spring, UIL band music, and for their spring music. And that's our procedure that we work on for the seventh grade year.
Excellent. All right. So we're going to move on to the next part, which is limb coordination and stroke development. So this is the 4th to the 7th week. This is another 3-week kind of endeavor. And by the way, like with both of these, the first 2, the most important thing is mastery. I want to make sure that it's not like after 3 weeks we cut it off. If the full body of the class is not doing what you need them to do and meeting that expectation, it's okay for it to go a little bit longer. Or this next part, the limb coordination. I've had groups from me before that weren't nearly as coordinated, and I needed a few more days or another week to develop these things. Go ahead and take that time now. You're not going to get that time back at the end of the year. These are foundational. So make sure that the limb coordination and stroke development in the first 2 here are super, super solid before we move forward. So speaking of moving forward, let's do it. So this is week 4 to 7. The most important thing when I talk to kids about this and limb coordination and stroke development is this is not a competition. This is a skill. And I make give the example of we don't go around like shaming babies for trying to walk. I mean, they get up, they fall, they get up, they fall, they keep trying until one day everything starts to walk off on all 4 cylinders. And then all of a sudden you're walking just like everybody else is in the world, and that's okay. So this is a growth thing, not I have this and I get it once. And this is not everything that we're going to learn and work on in percussion. Some of us are going to get it faster than others, and some of us will take a little bit more time. But everybody can achieve it. So define, this is during all this limb coordination stuff, at the beginning of this, we define a playing stance. stand height, stick heights, all of those things, and we adhere to this every single day. How to do it, what procedure to go through, how do we pull the instruments out of, how do we put them back, what the expectations are for storage or wherever yours is at. But we have that every day, and I have a kid that knows it's set on his time. It's like, boop, at this time, we pack everything up and it goes back there because this is not how long it takes. And by the way, once I do this, we also practice setting up and tearing down. And I usually have about a minute and a half. It's like, this is not talking time, this is putting away time. And so making sure that you define that for those kids, that they can do it within the qualified time. And when they don't do it, then we'll spend the next day practicing putting it back and setting it up. They don't like doing that, but I promise you, after a day of doing that, they'll remember the next day, we're going to be quiet and we're going to put everything back where it belongs. So this is also where we start introducing the full stroke. That is, every stroke, the stick starts at the top of the stroke, beads together, and it comes down and returns back to the top of the stroke without any resistance. No resistance. And so I start developing this full stroke motion in both hands, and sometimes it's just one hand at a time. But please remember, like in the previous 3 weeks, we've been doing this wrist motion already. And so like it's already kind of been ingrained in the kids already to kind of what to do. Most of the time, the kids will just latch onto it right there. But I usually start tempo 55, and I'll develop one hand at a time, right hand, then our left hands, and then getting both hands mirrored together to look the same and feel similar. Applying the full stroke to the daily warm-up that we've already memorized, and so we'll play that first, and then we add the foot tap to it later. Coordinate one thing, and then add a secondary layer to it. We also do the verbiage along with that, so I'm layering things. Once they've mastered one thing, that's fine. Add the next thing. Foot tap. Okay, let's do it now, and tap your foot. The next thing, everybody articulates. Whatever is coming out of your drum is coming out of your hand at the same time. And there's no exceptions to this. And what I explain to the students is that we're trying to develop their internal dialogue so that when they look at music, they can hear and see. They can hear and see themselves playing what it is that's on the page. You must connect this verbal articulation to what comes out of the instrument, period. Upbeat coordination to foot tap. That's one that takes a little bit of time to do. But the full warm-up, by this time, about the end of week 5, the beginning of week 6, we're playing our full warm-up with a foot tap. And I'm going to play the warm-up here for you and show you what it looks like and how that stuff goes. We incorporate, once the full warm-up and foot tap is done, we're incorporating real instruments into the warm-up. And I would encourage you to do this as many as you can tolerate. And I have a few remedies here to help alleviate some of the sound things too as well. But as many as you can tolerate. I have about 12 students, and I usually have two to three playing on a snare drum, and one playing on timpani, and one playing on bass drum as we go through. And I'll show you the videos here in a second. And when we go from pads, we're playing at full stroke. A lot of this is just muscular development. When we move to playing real instruments, the rule of thumb for every student is, first of all, cut the volumes, cut the heights from pad to real instrument in half. That's the starting point. The second layer, though, is you have to be able to hear your other players. You have to be able to hear the recording that we're playing with. Do not play any louder. So we're starting to engage their listening skills and the playing skills in one, being aware of, first of all, your sound in ratio to everybody else's around you, and it's the whole team effort. And the last one is through these 3 weeks of limb coordination and development, take your time and make sure that every student has the correct hand-to-foot coordination. I have some things that I'll show you here too that I use to help with the coordination, but we'll do that after we watch the videos. So this is the daily warm-up. I sped the videos up because they were...
All right, here we go. 1, 2. Right hand. Left hand. Right hand. Left hand. Alternate.
Oops, sorry.
Upbeat. Upbeat. 1, 2, 3 takes a 3. 1, takes a two, take two. One.
So that's a basic run through of our daily warm up. We work through that, and when we start learning it, I didn't have the kids counting out loud there, but when we are doing it, the kids count out loud the entire time, connecting that, what they hear and what they're feeling, to what's coming out of the instrument. This is the daily warm up with bass drum on multiple instruments or multi surface instruments. So really, you can move this exercise and other things that you're playing around multi instruments without having the music in front of them, but they can just put, hey, right hand here, left hand here, or like beat 1 is always on the left drum, beat 2 is always on the right drum, beat 3 is on the left drum, and so on, or beat 1 and 2 is on the left drum, beat 3 and 4 is always on the right drum. You can break that down and create variations so they learn how to move between multiple surfaces using good technique and good sounds. So this is an example of that one.
All right, here we go.
And I rotate the kids around.
1, 2. Right hand. Left hand. Right hand. Left hand. Alternate. Upbeat. Upbeat. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
And so that's just a small example of how I continually, I'm always changing that daily warm up. The kids are rotating around. And this also keeps you from having to, once you get to your concert band music for the holiday concert and moving forward there, you have a kid that's never played bass drum or knows how to keep time in quarter notes. At least those things are going to be coming up because they're always doing this every day and they understand how the instrument works. They understand how it plays in relationship to everything else. I think you also saw on there too that I laid towels on the back side of the snare drums. That helps dampen the sound a little bit more so the kids can play with other players and it just doesn't deafen everybody in the room. And same thing with timpani too as well, so they can hear themselves. Eventually when we're doing this, I'll take them off for some of them, but in the beginning of this, when they're learning the stroke, I want them to be able to hear and feel those things, and it'll help a whole lot with just your own sanity, number one, but so that the other pad players can hear themselves as well. Let's see, and the next one is, I do the daily warm-up. I don't introduce press strokes until a little bit later in the next section, but I wanted to show you what it looks like. You take the same warm-up, and then you can add teaching press strokes or buzz strokes into it as well.
1, 2. Right hand. Left hand. Right hand. Left hand. Alternate. Upbeat. Upbeat. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1.
So that's with press strokes. And so the other thing I like to use during this limb and coordination development time is coordination aids. And I think you saw some of the kids back there with hi-hat stands. They also, the thing here in the middle is called a gahate pedal. They're around $20 a piece or whatever, but you can attach a pedal to it as well. You can put a wood block on there. If you're going to put a capital on there, I would mute it. And this thing over here on the right is a bass drum pad. And you could even create these if you want. You can look at the design and make your own if you want to. These, I feel like, since I'm a big proponent of every percussion student should be able to tap their foot and play rhythms. I don't trust a percussionist that can't, honestly. And so, like, since I believe that, this is a huge deal for me, and I feel like this is the key. And yes, it does take time, and it does need time to develop. But the coordination aids help give sound and life to that foot that may be not being heard by the student, or maybe not being felt as well. But it gives it a volume, and gives it something that they can latch onto to help with that internal time and locking up with their hands. So, cultivating these fundamentals, I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. Dillard here, and he's going to talk to you about that.
Thank you, Robbie. All right. So, just what Robbie just talked about, we take those elements of those fundamentals, and I'll start back with the fall semester of us and region band music, and we isolate those fundamentals that they worked on their beginning years. So, for example, we're looking at the region band snare music, and it has flams in it, and it have drags in it. It has 5-stroke rolls. It has nine stroke rolls, 17-stroke rolls, maybe some paradiddles in there. We isolate those things. We mark it in their music. We isolate them, and that becomes a daily routine of an exercise that we work on to make those better. We do the same thing with the timpani etude. Let's say the timpani etudes in is in fourths. We work on ear training in fourths, and that becomes a routine that we work on in the keyboard to enhance their listening skills to tuning the drums for the region etude. And then we do the exact same thing for the mallet etude, whatever key it's in. We'll encompass everything dealing with that key, doing it in the green pattern, doing it thirds, doing arpeggios. Not only doing that, but we also do the minor. We'll do everything dealing with the fundamentals that they will utilize in that that mallet etude, and that becomes a major fundamental for those first 2 months that we're working on in that region music. Well, and now when we get to the Christmas music, sometimes there's not enough time because there's a short window. You're talking about from November with the holiday in there, Thanksgiving in there, and then some people having their Christmas concert the first week of December. It might be a crash course where you're learning music really fast. So we'll hold off and wait to enhance and do the exact same thing we did with the region music. We'll wait to do it in the spring semester with their solo and ensemble music. So we'll break it apart as well. So if they have snare etudes that they're playing, we'll break it apart and figure out the rudiments, and those rudiments become our fundamental of our exercise that we're working on. Their mallet etude, whatever the etude is, it might be a 4 mallet etude at that point, their 8th grade year. We start breaking it down and working on whatever fundamental exercise, and that becomes a foundation exercise that we utilize in the spring semester. Not only do we get to utilize that for 2 months in the spring semester, sometimes we get to do it even further because at this point, believe it or not, kids will learn literature, especially their UIL concert band literature, really quick. And there's no reason for them to be sitting in somebody's band class that they understand how to roll on a snare drum or roll on a suspended cymbal or crash cymbals the correct way, Monday through Friday. So there's a lot of times that the directors allow this to pull them out of their class, and then we can be reinforcing the information that we've been working on from from September leading into leading into March, maybe late March and into April. And then we also do the exact same thing with the literature that we select for the end of the spring semester. And usually that's the catalyst to whatever fundamentals we've been working on for the fall semester as exercises. That will push the envelope on what literature and what type of literature that I want to select for them to be playing in the end of the spring semester. I try not to be enhancing and doing the same thing. I try to find something different, some more new elements, some different rudiments, or maybe playing on a different keys on the mallet etude that they played on before. So we're constantly reinforcing those fundamentals, those new fundamentals that we learned, and specifically for the 7th grade year, we can enhance on them going into their 8th grade year.
Excellent. And yes, of course, variety is key. So the whole next section here is from the eighth week of school all the way through the 2nd week of December, and that is the combination of that synthesis of reading skills, fundamental development, and stroke development. And so this is rhythms, all of them, every snare drum book or every method book that you're going to use for your beginning percussion class has like a progression of rhythms going from 8th notes to 16th notes and all that stuff. Read all of them. Read all of them. If it's not written in there with dynamics, read them at different dynamics. Teach the kids, incorporate all those music skills that we've learned from the beginning of the school year. Sticking rules, of course, as they pertain to the rhythmic subdivisions and so on. Multi-surface playing, you can take that. I'm going to give a demonstration here of that here in a second. You can take any page, rhythm page of the book and move it around. Timpani, bongos, congas, anything with 2 different surfaces just to start getting that more introduced and getting that to be commonplace on a daily basis. Introducing press strokes into your daily warm-up. This is when I'm usually doing this. It's usually around the end of September, early October. the different stroke types, downstrokes, upstrokes, taps, all of those things here. We're introducing this towards the middle of November, and that applies into our basic rudiments and how to apply all those stroke types and what they look like and how they apply into the music. And then finger stroke development. And I have a whole thing about that one too. Give me a second here. I'll do it with this mallet since I don't have it. So if you want to take this part right here, what we do with this is I'll have the students take their stick, put it in between the index finger and the middle finger, and let's see if we can get this. We just use the back of the hand to motivate the motion of the stick, like this. And the kids will bounce the stick on. I'll play like a pop tune on YouTube or whatever, and we'll first start off with 8th notes, 16th notes, all the way up, and just do different variations of that off of the right hand, and then, of course, your left hand too as well. And so this gets them to incorporate, since everything so far has been only wrist motion and just keeping a relaxed approach to the stick, this really starts to incorporate, oh, wow, I can use this back part of the hand to do things. And that's going to help a lot more when you're starting to do those rudiments and the basic rudiments too as well. So here is a little bit of a demonstration here for the multi-surface stuff, and we took three lines out of the book, and we play them on just on multi-surfaces. And then the second video is I take everything that we do and all the way through this page, and I'll go, all the 16th notes now are press strokes. And so you add that kind of roll element to it. You begin to introduce the concept that underneath every roll, there's a rhythm. And so here, the kids are playing rhythms underneath with those press strokes in the music. So here it is. The other thing that this also provides too as well is that also provides listening environment things. And if you notice too as well, they didn't exactly stay with it, but they kind of got back to it too as well. It gives you a whole lot of different opportunities to address ensemble, who's listening to who's listening where, and so on and so forth. So multi-surface with press strokes. Same exercise with 16 notes. And of course, the timpanist is not playing press strokes, so there you go. So after this, I'm going to have Gerald talk again about cultivating coordination and reading skills.
Thank you, Robbie. All right, so in the fall semester, I'm going to start back with the fall semester. I did talk about the different elements where we focus on. Not only are we focusing on those elements, for us, reading-wise, I start off with something very simple for their 7th grade year. We will do a lot of stick control exercises. And those are just basic, and we don't like beat them to death, but we make sure that becomes a small element of routine that we do it, and we do it along with music. I found that when I used to do it with a metronome, and it gets kind of mundane after a while, but if you find whatever appropriate pop chart is going and you pump it through some little small speakers or one speaker, a Bose speaker, it's like it works wonders for the kids. So we do a lot of stick control, and then we do for our mallet reading, we do a lot of small segments of like maybe 1 or 2 measures, and that 1 or 2 measures might be our focus measure for the week, and where we're just reading, calling out note names, playing and calling out note names, making sure we understand how to place a music stand the appropriate way on a keyboard. And those are the fundamental things that we work on for that fall semester. And in the spring semester, we might break away a little bit from the stick control exercises and might do a little bit more rhythmic reading of the snare drum etudes. Once again, 1 or 2 measures, not over indulging the kids, keeping it small and precise, and doing the same thing on the mallet reading, never going over one or two measures, and doing the same thing consistently throughout the spring semester. And that's in the seventh grade year. And mainly when we get into the eighth grade year, we can get a little more complex. We might figure out that we can read a small excerpt or a little small etude, and that in the easy etudes, and we're doing that for the fall semester. And in that spring semester, we're getting a little bit more complex with some of the things, and especially leading them towards when a lot of those kids are going to audition for their high school percussion programs. They're the first drumline audition, so we're focusing on that and reading those fundamentals, but consistently understanding that you're not over indulging the kids, because already based on what I talked about and all the different elements we're doing, and that's a lot. That's a lot. And number one, it's a lot for the kids and it's a lot for the instructor. And it's a commitment level that the instructor has to have with the head director that number one, I am going to see those kids every day. Number two, the commitment level from the head director, I'm going to allow you to see those kids every day. And it becomes one, they become one team. It's never going to work well if head director, percussion director don't get along, or percussion director never comes over when they say they're going to come over. That's going to be a disaster in itself. It's about consistency and sticking to the plan.
Thank you, Gerald. All right. So this is, of course, the December concert, and what I like to do since we've been doing this, I try to incorporate as many multi-surface instruments as possible that the students can work on, because we've been doing that all semester. I have as many real drums out there as possible that enhance the program itself. I rewrite our music to incorporate as many of the things from the semester as possible, just within the confines of good taste, okay, of course. And then I usually have one or two of my students who maybe already have previous keyboard experience, can read and do all those kind of things. I have them all play a keyboard or a chime part in the music itself. But I'll always have a timpani part. I'll always have these certain things that are always happening for that, so that it encapsulates everything that we've been doing this semester. So let's move on now to the spring semester, where I'd like to begin my keyboard fundamentals. And please remember that, like here, we have been doing the first 5 minutes of every day for the last 4 months. The first 5 minutes have been doing note names. So these kids by this time of year, and my students by this time of year, are super familiar with the full scale, grand staff, whole 9 yards. And so we've been going over this a lot. So I try to incorporate most of this to be getting to know the instrument, getting to know the keyboard, getting familiar with the roadmaps around it, how to use it, how to read on it, because it's a little different than playing on a single surface. So what we're doing first is applying the full stroke to the keyboard, or I know some people like to call it the piston stroke. I don't like to differentiate my language too much from that, because if I do, it becomes something different, but it's literally a full stroke on the keyboard. Starts at the top, comes back to the bottom, strikes the instrument, and comes back to the top of the stroke. I teach 11 major scales in the chromatic. I do not teach G flat and F sharp. I explain to the kids that C sharp and D flat, they of course know by now that those are the same things. But it helps me with 5 flat scales, 5 sharp scales, and then C. So that's how that works. And I'll show you there's a scales jam that we do that the kids memorize and we play. So the grand staff relationship to the keyboard is the staff is a GPS for the keyboard itself. It has specific, there's only one note that lands on that keyboard that's on that staff right there. And so we'll talk about that with the kids a lot. They understand the circle, fourths, and fifths relationships to the scales and how they're created, and I'll show you the worksheet that we go through. Arpeggios and how they're created and how they relate to the scale. Movement around the keyboard, and I have a demonstration of that with a little game that I like to have with the kids called the Infinite Chromatic Scale. And then we identify all the above, all of those things. We go back through, like we did before, what do you see? We go back through and start to identify all of these elements that we've been learning about. What do they look like in music? Oh, that's what a scale looks like. Oh, that's what thirds looks like. Oh, that's what an arpeggio looks like. And so these kind of things that we're not only like doing them and physically learning how to do them, but we're also talking and identifying them in music, which is super key, because then you have kids who go, this whole piece of music is my fundamentals. And so that to me is a super important thing. So this is my major scales primer. I hand this out to every kid that we go through this. Scales are the musical alphabet. I have so many kids that don't understand that, and so I've started to do it more visually this way too as well. They're just like the alphabet. They do not skip letters at all. There may be a different flavor of note, but it is still just an alphabet, and you can only use it once for an octave. Circle of fourths gives the flat scales. Note the fourth note of the scale is the new flat. Circle of fifths gives the sharp scales. Seventh note of the scale is a new sharp, of course. And then we go through all of that stuff too, and I use that. Let me go back here real quick. I use this here, and it kind of gives a visual indicator too for like where the flat notes are. And the first thing that they'll do after they do their note names is they write the scales out, physically write the notes out and by name, and so that they understand and they can physically see how it works. And then we'll start to physically write them out in the staff too as well, just one octave up and one octave down, just so that is starting to be established, and that's the foundation of it. Everything that we do movement-wise around the instrument. So this is the Scales Jam. This usually takes about 6 weeks from the beginning of January to about the second week of February, around TMBA time for those of us who are in Texas. So, and it takes them through five scales on either the flat and sharp side, plus C and the chromatic scale all the way through. The kids have to articulate what scale that they're saying in order to get credit for it. And so this is the Scales Jam that we play through.
Your first scale, no sharps or flats. The next scale, one flat. The next scale, two flats. The next scale, three flats. The next scale, four flats. The next scale, five flats. To the sharp scales. The first one sharp. The next scale, two sharps. The next scale, three sharps. The next scale, four sharps. The next scale, five sharps. You ready to say your triplets? Ready and steady. One. Ready and play.
And they always love applause at the end of it too as well, because it's a job well done, and those kids are killing it. So this is, we've been doing that every day in class, and I usually build about two scales every day. So we're working over 2 scales every 3 days or so, and then we just compound on each other all the way through. At the end of that first week, it's usually like all the flat scales. Into that second week, it's usually all the sharp scales, and then that third week there, we're starting to piece them together as a whole, and then we add the chromatic scale on the end of it. So at that second week of February, we have the Scales video project. The limitations of the project are this: you have to record yourself playing along with the Scales Jam track between 100 and 120. You can be serious, you need to either dress up nice, or you can be silly. You cannot be yourself. That's the only thing. And so it's something fun and creative for the kids to do. And so it's this is some of the things that I've gotten. And I'm going to fast forward since we've kind of already seen some of this stuff too, but I'm going to push it through here for the sake of time and just show you these are actual submissions from the kids. I've had kids show up in sumo suits, dinosaur suits, kid dressed up in a tuxedo. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And they make it as I tried to tell them, the more fun you make it, the better it's going to be.
See.
So,
No sharps or flats.
and this kid is actually wearing a suit here too as well. I have a kid in his baseball uniform, and then finally I have a student in a luchador mask. And to be quite honest, for them to be excited about playing scales, to me, is the most important thing. Like, it has to have a place to live, and it has to have a purpose. And so this gives it a whole nother level. For me, it's a whole nother level of excitement about learning your fundamentals. And so that is the Scales video project. And so when we move forward in the next section of the year, that's that third week of February, moving forward, I'm doing a whole lot of different things since they already know their scales. We're learning how to manipulate the scales in thirds and fourths, arpeggios. All of these things we're learning how to use them and learning, applying those skills. And every single day after they're done doing their note names, the first thing we do on a keyboard is one of these elements right here and all of the different variations. And so I'll play this for you. These are just scale manipulations. You have thirds up and down. The green exercise. So, sorry, with the roll patterns here, and this is 2-count roll patterns. So I'll tell the kids like half note rolls, and they know what to do. Every roll, when I say rolls for this 6th grade year, they're all playing 16th notes. Well, no matter what we're doing right now, we're doing 16th notes, and we talk a little bit. I changed that a little bit toward the end of the school year, but in the beginning of it, we're going to do like either quarter note roll pattern, half note roll pattern, or dotted half note, whole note, and so on. But I'll tell them, and I can change that up day to day. Okay, so the roll patterns here are just playing 16th notes within the duration that I asked for. And so the last one here, that rhythmic pattern, I will have them play the rhythm on one note first, the note that I'm going to have in the scale, and it'll be like maybe 3 or 4 counts long. And then I will demonstrate for them, we're going to play it up the scale starting on the first note, and then that third note, whatever, we're going to go down. And I'll give them directions on what to do, and I'll play it for them. And then it's their job then to figure out, I'll give them 5 minutes to figure it out, what hand to start on, and then we go through the pattern starting on each note of the scale. Play the pattern starting on C. All right, now started on D, started on E, started on F. So learning how to manipulate patterns around the scale starting on any note of the scale itself. So that's the last one. And so this is another demonstration of infinite chromatic scale of how I get kids to learn how to move behind the keyboard. We move with their basic stances feet apart. And as we move up and down the keyboard, we're going to put our feet together, feet apart, feet together, feet apart. And that we never try and cross our feet at any point or turn our bodies side to side. We always want to keep a flat profile to the front, to the ensemble, or to the keyboard itself. So this is just a demonstration, and the kids love this, by the way. I've even done this over a course of 3 instruments themselves, and it's a lot of fun the better they get at it. But here it is. So you get the idea here. So, and as they get better at that, I'll speed it up a little bit by a little bit by a little bit by a little bit until it kind of all falls apart. But they love it, and they always have a lot of fun with it. So that's the infinite chromatic scale. So applying reading skills and fundamentals to learning the keyboard music too is the next section. And that is, so we have all of these fundamental skills, and we've been exercising it, learning how to identify it. We've been reading music. We've been learning how to move around the instrument too, getting more comfortable with that. And so the staff is the GPS for the instruments, and we use the accidentals as road markers. And so like when the kids are learning their scales, and once they have that memorized, what I'll have the kids do is I tell them to look down at a 45-degree angle along the front side of the accidentals. Now play your scale. And as they play, and they have to keep that angle of their eyes. And so this is mostly like training with something that they already know how to do, but keeping their eyes fixed in a certain place and letting their familiarity and getting that, strengthening that GPS of where notes are, using the accidentals, using something that they already know and are already confident with. So that is the GPS accidental road markers. We daily manipulate the scales in greens, thirds, arpeggios, roll patterns, the whole 9 yards. We memorize the reading process procedures, which I'll explain to you here in a second. We define the learning process, which is like building a house. And then we read. And we read something new every single day, sometimes more than one thing new. It is all about literacy and all about building it. And so when I start these, the reading skill, we're building it to, like for the first week, I have like 5 or 6 pages of just 2 measure chunks, of each line. And that's your job, is just to read 2 measures, read 2 measures, read 2 more measures, read 2 more measures, read 2 more measures. The next week, 4 measures. Okay, now how do I put 4 measures together? And I teach them how to do all that kind of stuff. But it's chunks, little bit at a time, little bit at a time. And once they understand that and they see the process and how fast they can do it, it goes by real fast, real quickly. No one reads the same piece as another. When we start reading like 3 and 4 or 5 measures at a time, or pieces that I have a like a little packet of about 40, like there are recorder solos and flute solos and smaller things, and we'll read out of the book. And I have some other things that pass out. No one reads the same piece, and so when we do this, I give them all numbers. Each of the pieces are numbered, and I was like, all right, you're going to start with number 1 today. You're going to start with number 5. You'll start with number, and that way nobody is reading the same thing all the way through. And so during this time, though, it is all monitored, goal-oriented practice time. Like reading a keyboard and strengthening that skill is an individual act. It's really hard to get everybody onto that same page and get everybody moving forward. Individual act, and it's a monitored, goal-oriented practice time. And I'm always actively going around to each kid, and I'm asking them about the process. Where are you in the process? What part of the process are you having problems with, and so on and so forth. So the other important thing is that this individual practice time, I tell the kids that this is not your greatest hits performance time. Like I don't need to hear, your Christmas, I don't want to hear the Christmas music that you were playing on the keyboard again. You've already played that, let's move something. This is all about reading more. And then at the end of class, usually about the last 7 to 8 minutes, I usually have individuals perform at the end of class every single day. So we define the reading process here. This is where we memorize this process, and then the kids, when they get a new piece of music, they go through this process every time. When we do it, I kind of coach them through it the first few times, and then I give them pieces of music, and I ask them questions about what's this, and we go through it together so that they get practice learning it, and then they memorize the process so that it all becomes second nature. So when they get a piece of music, it usually takes about 30 to 45 seconds for them to go through these 10 steps. But the first one, time signature, clef, key, what scale or scales am I using for this? Range. And when we do range, by the way, I take their mallets and I have them place their mallets at the right behind the lowest note and right at the top of the highest note. A lot of times they'll figure out real quick that this piece is only 5 notes wide. It only uses 5 or 6 notes of the scale. So notes outside of the key signature, repeated phrases or rhythms, and I'm looking for large scale views. Anything that's repeated, is it and I'll intentionally give them pieces that have these large phrases so that they can identify them. So, and then identifying the smaller patterns, the parts of our fundamentals. What fundamentals do you see in this piece of music? Are there arpeggio, scale patterns, large leaps? Any of these things that you can see that are repeated in patterns that help you learn it faster. Counting rhythms out loud is the one thing that they mostly forget to do. But number 8 and 9 are the big ones. Counting rhythms out loud, and then playing the rhythms on a single note. And then we go through, start beginning with the notes and rhythms and building each measure, building the piece 2 measures at a time. But those are the 10 steps. They have to memorize it, write it down, and then we start to go through that for each piece of music that we look through. And by the end of the semester, after doing this like consistently every day for about a month and a half, they're super sharp at it, and they love to, especially identifying the patterns and arpeggios and stuff like that. Like I'm tossing out pieces of candy for people who can find arpeggios and all that other kind of stuff. Just not only for them to get excited about it, but so that there's more of a payoff in the long run, that this process is being rewarded to as well. So our learning process, I got this actually from Jonathan Oval, from who's a percussion instructor too as well. I use the illustration of a house and building it. So measure 1 and 2, these are the foundational. This first layer is all foundational. We build it 2 measures at a time. The transitional layer is the part that's on top of it here. That's the measures that join in between. So in between measure 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We're going to work on measure 2 and 3. That's the first transitional measure that solidifies the first 4 measures. And then 5 and 6 and the solidification. And we talk about, well, what solidifies 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8? Oh, that's measures 4 and 5. And so like these kind of things, and illustrating it this way and the building of this makes it very simple for them to not look at a piece of music and freak out, because you're going to have a lot of kids that like look at something that's 4 or 5 measures or 4 or 5 lines long, and it's like instantly, I can't get this. Building the house. Where are you building at? What brick are you stuck on? I mean, we talk like that in that language in the classroom, and I was like this, and the kids would be like, measure 2, the transitional measure is really kicking my rear end right now, or whatever. So this really helps the kids like start to isolate how are they building their process, and it gives them something to walk through on a regular basis. So building the piece 2 measures at a time, transitional measures solidify the structure. The base level layers are the musical phrases, and you can help them start to identify that in the beginning, and it'll help develop that as they go through, being able to identify, oh, this is the phrase ending, and so on. Transitional layers solidify the musical phrases, and every brick must have that mortar that connects that part to its whole, and that's that transitional layer too. That's all that mortar, that strengthening part of the first 4 measures, that those 2 measures in between that connect those 2. And the most important thing, because I think you're going to probably find you have most kids with tears at this level, is be patient with yourself. And everybody learns it and acquires the skill at a different level. And that's okay. And that's totally okay. And I also like to put this out there. What kind of performance are you working on? And I always like to use this visual demonstration for the kids. It always makes them laugh. But I mean, like, it's also gives a very visual reference of like, yeah, this didn't go very well, so it's kind of messy. Well, of course, like that you're going to have problems there. And so, like, what kind of performance are you working on? It's a really good question to start asking. So, all right, synthesis and fundamentals and the learning process of all of those things throughout the keyboard reading skill section. That gets us up to about the second week of April, into that second and third week of April, sometimes a little bit later, it all depends. But this is all the synthesis of fundamentals, and this is in the application of all of the things that we've been learning so far. And I'm gonna hand it over to my co-host here, and let him talk to you about the synthesis of all the fundamental stuff.
Okay, so there's a lot that we just went through in beginning years. In 7th, now we're in that 7th grade year or 8th grade year. And for me, one of our bread and butter is percussion ensemble. We kind of live and die by percussion ensemble literature, because that's the one element that we have the control of working on any fundamental that we know that the kids might be lacking, or whatever fundamental we want them to improve to enhance the skills that they're going to use in a concert band setting. So, for example, let's say we want to work on the fundamentals of accessories. There are a ton of ensemble pieces out there, just focus on accessories. And so that thing is what we'll focus on to enhance things for concert season. Because we've already worked on snare drum, we've already worked on timpani, we've already worked on mallets with the region band music. So why not focus on some accessories to help the concert band portion in the spring semester? So that becomes a major focus for us. If you buy into those accessories instruments, those auxiliary instruments, they become those instruments that kids want to play. If we don't focus on those instruments and put a priority to them, they become those instruments that the kids are not enjoying playing, and they look down upon when they get assigned those parts. So we try to make sure that there's ownership in them and to show that there's importance in them, and in that 7th grade year and that 8th grade year. So when it happens, it becomes, oh, I want to play triangle. I want to play tambourine, because I think we were talking about it this morning. Robbie and I were like, if your kid's playing pushta for the first time, and I think that's a grade 3 or grade 4 band piece, it's got thumb rolls and a tambourine part. And if a kid does not know how to do thumb rolls, then there's going to be an issue. So those become those fundamental things that we try to apply working with the percussion ensemble literature to help enhance the concert band literature. And in the process of enhancing that concert band literature, making sure we're picking the right pieces that have those auxiliary instruments in it to enhance those skills in that spring semester. Those kids, some of those kids, they're going in eighth graders going into high school. That's been, hopefully you don't want the first time to put four mallets in their hands, or it's that eighth grade high school band audition, because you're putting them at a disadvantage. So that's that time of year where we can spend maybe a couple of weeks to talk about four mallets, the basic four mallets. This is what we're going to do. It might not be the prettiest thing in the world, but we're getting them going and doing some basic exercises on four mallets, and we start working on that. And then Robbie was really big on this, and we've done this quite a while at our school, but not to the extent that he has done it. There are tons of duets and trios out there, and it's not a matter of just going on percussion websites and finding books. They're just associated to duets and trios. They're just, you can get like, my wife's a flautist, so I like taking her books that has tons of duets and flute trios in there. They're great for mallet reading with the group. Or you can take a piano part. That's a no-brainer. You can give a piano part where somebody will play the bass part and somebody play the upper register, and you can double that up on mallets. And we do that a lot, especially for our Christmas pieces sometimes, because we're looking for something that really wants to focus on Christmas mallet ensembles. And then I think let Robbie talk about the arpeggio project. Arpeggios, I'll just tell you this much on the arpeggios. For us, that is an essential tool that we start back in the fall semester, because we're already working on it for whatever key that the region band music is in. And then we add on to it and working on it in the spring semester based on whatever keys that their solos are in. And so that's a constant occurrence that's going on. But Robbie, I think, will talk more in depth about the arpeggio project that he does at his school, which is pretty neat and pretty exciting for the kids.
Yeah, I have a video, actually. If you look at the handout that I posted up there, I have a video that explains the whole thing. But the essential breakdown of it is this: the Chordify. There's a website, chordify.net. I have the kids pick any tune that they want. It has to have, of course, you can't have any. It has to be appropriate for school, but they can pick any song that they want, and using the arpeggios that we go through, and they learn how to play that piece of music. So I'm trying to connect their fundamentals into something that they listen to every day. And I've had some awesome performances of, like, I've had kids come and play Justin Bieber, like, you name any of this other stuff, like, you name the artist and that's out there on the radio, and I've had kids come in and play it. And some get so excited about it that they're doing multiple songs. And so this is just another project, a part of that whole thing that we do. And what Gerald was referencing to, these are the things that we're doing in my sixth grade class. Once I'm done with that reading keyboard fundamental stuff, these are all the things that I'm doing. I'm talking especially with the auxiliary techniques and the notation, because that's a lot different than the most of the standard notation that we've already been looking at. It's a big time to pull out all of that stuff out of the closets, start getting into instrument techniques too as well, if you haven't been doing so a little bit throughout the year, is what I like to do. So, and then the last part here is the bonus round. So if we get through this, and a lot of times my concert is around the second or third week before the end of school year. So I have some time at the end of the school year. What I'm going to do, instead of to break up the monotony of maybe working on their audition music or things like that, I'm teaching timpani etudes, some fun 2 and 3 drum etudes. And like sometimes I even have kids write their own etudes. We're doing intermediate coordination skills. We'll go back into our method book, and I'll tell the kids, I was like, pick a page, Jimmy. Okay, cool. So everybody, I want you to play the quarter note in your right hand on the rim, and I want you to play the rhythm of the entire page in your left hand. And we'll get all the way through it. All right, let's go back. Put the quarter note now. Play quarter note time in your left hand, and all the rhythms now are played in your right hand. And so, oh man, this is a brain fry at first, but after about, usually about a day, when they kind of work through some of the coordination of those basic rhythms, oh, it's awesome, and it's on, and they have such a good time with this one. We'll do basic drum set styles and basic fills, and then we'll also introduce hand drums, because of course there's lots of other hand drum things that the kids need to learn how to do. for their concert bands going into 7th and 8th grade too. And so like that stuff is totally applicable and it's a lot of fun too as well for the kids because they had these drums around. They had never been taught how to use them. So it's a great thing to incorporate those hand drums as much as possible. So that is my curriculum throughout the year, and I'd like to thank my cohort here for his cultivation of all those ideas for the 7th and 8th grade contributions. And we also would like to say thank you to our 6th graders, my 6th graders here at Strock and Schindewolf Intermediate that were in the videos. We would like to thank, of course, our ISDs, Klein ISD and Conroe ISD, and our finance coordinators, Mr. Bob Horton and Creston Herring, and of course the wonderful people at Innovative Percussion for supplying shirts for the students and for their support of our clinic too. So at this point in time, if there are any questions and if you guys have anything, I'll be more than happy to answer anything, any questions that you have about what we do or what we spoke about today. And thank you for being here. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Let's see. So if you'd like to unmute, I can, got 5 questions here. There you go. Awesome.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and fire away.
Sure.
Okay. So first one is, how often do you guys do sectionals in the 7th, 8th grade years, as opposed to being in full band?
I'll tag on that. Sectionals there's a quote unquote morning sectional, just like all the WIN kids have morning sectionals, and they happen once a week. And as for during the actual weekday, the sectional in the fall semester is basically happening probably 4 times out of the week. Specifically Monday through Thursday, not Friday, because Friday usually that's game day and there's a lot going on at the high school, but Monday through Thursday. And then as we get closer to the Christmas concert time, it won't be that much because band directors will want their kids in their band rehearsals. That may be 2 times out of the week or 3 times out of the week. And then it will transfer back and do the same thing Monday through Thursday for the beginning of the spring semester because they're working on solo literature and ensembles. And then as they work on their band music, it might transfer back to 2 or 3 times a week. But when it gets to the band music, I'm in their rehearsal in the back of the room, standing next to them based on whatever's going on and trying to put out whatever fires that are going on. So, but mainly it's in the very beginning of that fall semester and the very beginning of that spring semester. They not only get a morning sectional, but they also get sectionals during band class.
Okay.
And also for Brendan Brady, to answer your question about the scales, the scale stuff, the beginning of it for me is about strengthening their awareness of the geography of the instrument. Because how can I ask you, like if we've been doing this note identification, strengthening their awareness of just note recognition, where is it at? Because a lot of this is just literally target practice, being able to hit and know what and how and what to use for my targets, and just getting familiar with the layout of it. That's the beginning of it with the scales and stuff. I slowly move that to the page and reading and connecting that to the reading skill. If that makes sense. And I know you're going to have a lot of students that try to memorize, and I tell my students myself is that this is not a memorization thing. This is a reading thing. It's a reading skill. You will memorize by virtue of reading, and so it's most important that memorization skill, that we make sure that yes, it will develop itself as you go along. But we want to focus on the actual physical reading of the instrument itself, or reading of the music itself, and being aware of all the elements and the awareness of the scale of the instrument while we're playing. So hopefully that was helpful. I use the Packet by Frank Chappell method book that I use, but I'll tell you this, I've used the Wessels. I've used Ken Wiley's book before. I don't think. I mean, it all kind of depends on your own personal preference and how you wish to teach. But I think all of them have great elements in them that you can use. So you're more than welcome to use any of them. I use the packet just because I know how I want. It doesn't have a whole lot of technical information in it, but I know how I want my technique to be taught and how I want my students to play. And so that really that allows me to use that in so many different ways.
I use the Wessel's book and I use the packet as well, but I'll use, like when we talked about stick control, I'll use whatever element that I think they need to be working on. I'll pull it from a different book and whatever we need to be working on that time of the year. And so they get a lot of isolated individual material. Try to create my own material based on what I see that is in their band music or what might be in their region band music. So it's a little bit of everything. It's not one essential book.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that too as well, I'm pulling like I mean with my keyboard stuff, like we'll read the stuff out of the packet, but like that I'm pulling stuff from so many different sources. I'll write my own things. Like I have on my Pocket Percussion Teacher website, like I've got over 500 sight reading melodies in 11 different keys. And so like I pull stuff from that. I pull stuff, the melodies that they know. I'll write out like, the latest, hottest pop tune or whatever. I'll write the melody out and I'll put a 3 question marks at the top of the page. It's like the first person can tell me what song this is, gets, whatever. I try to make it fun as possible. And so like that thing, again, with the reading every day, it's always something new and it helps them too to like be able to see notation, especially keyboard notation in different formats because you're going to see it in different formats all the way through. These are all real quick, really, really good questions. So, anybody else?
I have another one.
Sure, go for it.
So you talked a bit about giving them the in-class practice. Like, how often do you reasonably use that?
I usually have that paired with the first day or two is information about what we're doing and what skills we're applying that week, and then that's monitored. It's monitored practice time and goal-oriented practice time. So like they know they're following that the reading process that we went through, and like I'm constantly moving around from player to player. Like, hey, where are you at in the process? I'm at number 7. I'm reading my rhythms, or that kind of stuff. And so everybody's aware, and I'm also have them separated throughout the room. They all have different places to be in the rooms, and they're all in. They all know what they're supposed to be doing during that.
Okay. So if you're on a weekly process, first 2 days, you're going through a short etude. Possibly the last 3 days is practice time. How much practice time do you give them in that day, in that class period?
In that class period, so I'm doing fundamentals in the beginning of the class period, then we break up. So that's literally about 25 minutes, 30 minutes maybe. And then we have pack up time on the end of it too, so which is about another 5 minutes to move the keyboards back in.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else want to unmute themselves and say? Good. Awesome.
Well, I will say this again, just like Mr. Green just said, Robbie Green. I just want to, first of all, thank the wonderful kids at Strock and Schinderwolf for helping out. We would like to also thank the district, Klein ISD and Conroe ISD, and our wonderful coordinators and directors, Dr. Bob Horton and Creston Harris, for allowing us to have this opportunity to do this clinic, and the Innovative Percussion, Eric Johnson, for supplying us the beautiful shirts that the kids wore, and finally, and never not forgetting, TBA, Texas Bandmasters Association, for allowing us to do this clinic, because this is how this all came about. We're very gracious. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.